I know it's not going to be possible for you to get the Four Seasons culture going the way you're used to. And I just know. I'm okay with that, and I don't want you beating yourselves up over it. It's just not going to work. About 4 years later, he was back to visit us in Toronto, this time to complain. What was he complaining about? He was complaining because we had taken 200 employees over the course of the last 4 years, trained them up in his hotel, and transferred them to Four Seasons hotels all over the world. Not only was the culture alive and well in the Four Seasons in Cairo, but it became a talent factory for culture-led leadership for the company in so many different places. And he was, we were taking all of my best people, and I, well, no, actually what we're doing is we're helping your hotel become a beacon for great people. Because now the whole world knows, and the whole Middle East, in those days, this was a very different world than the one we're living in there today in the realm of luxury hotels. Now everybody knows that if I can get a job at the Four Seasons in Cairo, the sky's the limit for my career. And that's really what we wanted him to know. And so building that culture around the globe and testing the veracity of our values in all those different countries and all those different places, many of them not democratic, right? So our notion of democratic values really unknown to a lot of the employees. We were trying to engage in a very collaborative effort around service models. So it was challenging, but very rewarding.
So I remember you talking to me about when you opened up, I believe in Thailand, you were telling a story about how you thought you were going to improve the workers' environment because workers were working 7 days a week. Six?
Not 7.
Okay. And so you thought that by giving them a 5-day work week and so forth, it would improve their life. Talk a little bit about what it was like to manage so many different cultures and countries and diversity.
Just to finish that thought, because it's a funny one, you know, we bought a chain of hotels in Asia. We found out that all these employees working 6 days, oh my heavens, terrible. Treat your employees the way you would want to be treated. So we brought our North American mindset and said, okay, it's going to be so exciting to move everybody to 5-day work week. Well, you would have thought we said that we were going to, you know, bulldoze a sacred monument. The revolt was instant and palpable, and the employees were so unhappy. Why? Because notionally you'd say, oh, that's fine. Why is because when they got to come to work, they got to come to a place that was air conditioned. They got to come to a place where they had a hot shower as many times a day as they liked. They got to come to a place where their clothes were clean. They got to come to a place 6 days a week where they got fed 3 meals a day and good meals. All of a sudden you say to them, no, one of these days you're going to stay home. Not necessarily earn less money for those 5 days, but all those other benefits that we really didn't appreciate are so very important to the work life there. That's changed, obviously, over the course of the last 20 years, but it is an example of how difficult it is to do things. When we opened in Bali, we have 2 hotels in Bali now, but one of the first things we had to learn was that you know, in many places you deal with city council, you deal with the local municipality, you deal with other prominent members of the community. Well, in Bali, it was the local tribes leaders. Many of our hotels were in very remote parts of that island, and so the interface was completely different than anything we had ever had to take on before. When we opened in Chiang Rai, I don't know if you've ever been to Chiang Rai, but it's well known for its elephant population, and we had to write policies and procedures for an elephant camp where elephants are cared for. We have elephant polo. It's just a whole range of things that were so far beyond what you might have expected when you got started.
And you know, while many of us in this room are not managing a global brand, we're managing a global workforce, right? So a lot of millennials, Gen X's, a lot of diversity, Holly, that you brought up in your speech this morning. So I think it's great to take those learnings and maybe think about how we need to manage and meet the needs of our workforce as we have more and more pressure. I can imagine that the hospitality industry, you had a lot of women, you had a lot of women at all different levels, from entry level up to the highest level of management. As a female CEO, is there anything you did to create leadership programs for your women specifically?
I would say not enough. Back to there's so much work to do. I did set up a President's Council. All of my direct reports, with the exception of my head of marketing and my head of procurement, all of my direct reports were men, so that was 9 of the 11. My 3 area presidents who ran the world in 3 different regions were all men. And I asked them to begin a President's Council to start to begin to advance women in the industry. It's not an easy thing to do in any industry, and particularly had been difficult in the hotel industry, because it was long believed that women weren't particularly well suited for the 24/7, 365 kind of lifestyle that comes with the operational roles in a hotel. Clearly, that was just folklore. And today there are thousands of women who have come up through those operational ranks and are now running not only hotels, but I'm proud to say at Four Seasons, many of the women who I helped promote through the ranks today are regional vice presidents, and so they are actually running regions for the company as well. Is there more to do? Are we close to 50-50? No, and the industry is not. So there's plenty of work to be done.
Thank you. That's exciting that you grew so many women and got to see that accomplishment.
And I still stay in touch with all of them.
So, a recent conversation that you and I had got my mind going, and I honestly don't know if I was able to listen to every advice you gave me at that point, because my mind was racing so fast. But I think we can all agree in this room that there's been so many disruptors in our industry over the past 5-10 years that we never would have dreamed of that would have existed, right? And so you were talking that, you know, during your tenure, you were used to people booking appointments online, you know, calling for a reservation, and all of a sudden up popped Orbitz, Expedia, Travelocity, and so you had true disruptors. Did you see that coming? How did you prepare for it? You know, strategically, how did you keep thinking about future disruptors that you hadn't identified? Like, help us as an industry understand that.
So I would say the first thing is don't feel bad when you don't see it coming, because lots of people don't. I think the OTAs, online travel agents that Sue just mentioned, you know, literally took the industry by storm and disrupted not only the booking chain, but also the economics of the industry. You know, it had taken probably 100 years for the Travel Agent Commission standards to literally be global, with some variations here and there, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, comes the OTAs, and they're not going to charge that percentage, they're going to charge 2.5 times that. And there is no way out of that room, because you have no control over that flow of inventory. You can choose to not give them inventory, but now you're not putting any players on the field. So pretty difficult to win. So no, we didn't see it coming. Yes, we were able to adapt to it, and if you're looking at any of the brands you stay with, Marriott Starwood would be the most prominent example, given they're coming together. But what big brands have done is that they have doubled and tripled down on their own in-house online channels, and so it's so much easier now to make a booking at a host hotel. We did the same thing at Four Seasons. We completely, at great expense, rebuilt our website so that it was easy place to come to, easy place to book, and there was help immediately somewhere else. OTAs was one big example of that. Airbnb and everything that's going on in owner rentals is also become very disruptive to the hotel industry, and different cities have different feelings about how much impact it's had, but it's added yet another level of complexity to the message you have to get out there. And so one of the things that we did, and the way we think about these things, is that, yes, it's all new, but in some respects it's old. So when you think about the way the OTAs came in, they brought a channel for flow of inventory. It was kind of like what happened when the Japanese entered the travel market 30 years ago. When they brought their wholesale, I'm getting a little bit too technical here, but they brought big wholesale buys to the industry, and you had to participate in that. You had to sell your rooms at a cheap price before you knew whether that price was too cheap or too expensive, and it was risky. OTAs are exactly the same. And so we started to think about, wait a minute, we've been to this movie in a manner of speaking before. How do we take some of the strategies from our previous responses and adapt them to this? The same is now true in this owner rental market that is emerging. It's been around forever. People have been renting a room in their house, or renting out their cottage, and everybody's doing this. Now all of a sudden it's organized. And so it's not a new business, but it's a new business platform. And so then how to respond to that. So it unfortunately is something, competition is everywhere. As you know, you're in a very competitive industry. And that's never going to stop. And so figuring out how to adapt your own business models to meet and then exceed that competition is going to be
crucial, right?
Daily work. Daily work.
Yeah, I live most of my life not thinking about today, but thinking about 2
Yes.
years and 5 years.
Good.
Yeah, so I want to be cognitive of time, but I have a couple more questions before we go to Q&A. So recently in our industry, there was a little tiny consolidation with Esseler and Lux. Just a tiny one. But there's lots of consolidation, lots of mergers and acquisitions going on. How would you tell us, we all deal with them and have our own strategies, but as an industry, how would you tell us to look and feel and respond to what's happening in our space?
Sure. So when I think about business, because of my roots at Four Seasons, I always start first with the customer. And lots of people don't, right? Lots of people start with, are there any synergies? Is there any overlap? Is there any things that are being brought together? Is the sum of the parts going to be whole greater than the sum of the parts? Those sort of things. But I always start with the customer. And when I think about consolidation, I think all those other things are true. That synergies are gained, and businesses are made stronger, and the coming together of many businesses can create a more powerful platform. But if it doesn't make the experience of the customer, whoever that is, it might be a retail customer, it might be a commercial customer, it depends. But if it doesn't, at the end of it, make the experience of the business's customer better, then it probably is going to be a merger that doesn't fulfill its potential.
So go back to the culture, the purpose.
Go back to the culture, go back to the purpose, go back to what it is we're trying to, what it is as a business we're trying to do, what it is we're trying to sell, how effectively we are able to sell it, and keep testing all the time. Does this idea, we used to have an expression in Four Seasons, same or better? So you can make any change you wanted, including in the depths of a recession or in a merger or a takeover of another hotel. You can make any change you want, as long as the experience of the customer, it could be the guest, it could be the employee, it could be the owner of the hotel, it could be the supplier, whoever the customer in that framework was, if the change leaves them same or better off, then the trade's a good one. If the trade is that you'll save a little money, but the customer is worse off, that is a very bad long-term decision. And so that was kind of it's a silly little measure, but it's one that I continue to apply even to things involving big numbers.
That's great.